Okay. I will now call to order the study session meeting of April 18th, 2022. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the local government access channel 8, for Comcast subscribers on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford, Councilmember Whitkovich,
Here.
Councilmember Hadamio,
Here.
Councilmember Duran Malika, Councilmember Lukman Haramasa,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember, oh. Okay. Councilmember Walker,
Okay. We have 3 items for the study session tonight. The first one is Partners in Energy Electric Vehicle Action Plan and Phase 2 MOU. Becky Smith, our planning manager, will introduce the item. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Leidy, Council. Becky Smith, Planning Manager, here to present an overview of our Phase 1 MOU with Excel Partners in Energy, which was the planning phase of our electric vehicle action plan. I have Melody Radburn here tonight to present the overview of the action plan. She's one of the consultants working with us from the Partners in Energy. So with that, I'll turn it over to Melody to give us an overview of the recommendations from the presentation.
Did you match on purpose?
Yeah, yes, we called and we wanted to make sure we
That's
coordinated.
fantastic.
All right. Well, hello, council members. As Becky mentioned, my name is Melody Redburn. I'm a community facilitator with Excel Energy Partners in Energy. That's okay, thanks. Where do I need to point? Over here. Oh, no. I can just say next slide.
it was on.
Oh, there we go. All right. Great. Partners in Energy is a program offered by Excel Energy that is a 2-year collaboration between the communities that Excel Energy serves. We develop energy action plans and electric vehicle plans through this process. Northglenn previously participated in Partners in Energy beginning in 2019 to develop an energy action plan, and we've been working to implement that with the city since then. Following a 6 to 9 month planning phase where we establish goals and a vision for the city related to their energy or electric vehicle goals, we support an 18-month implementation period in order to make sure that the strategies we identified in the planning phase get off the ground and are able to be accomplished. Excel Energy through this process provides tools and resources along the way and connections to Excel Energy programs and program staff, as well as marketing and project management support. Through Partners in Energy, Excel Energy really aims to develop a better understanding of the communities that they serve. So we very much view this as kind of a 2-way communication channel so that you all are able to let Excel Energy know what your needs are related to energy and electric vehicles, and vice versa. They can connect to resources and things like that. It also helps align the services and programs that Excel Energy offers with those customer needs. And then finally, it supports communities with a philosophy of engagement and partnership to make sure that we're achieving all of these goals together, since you can't achieve them in a vacuum, and it requires a lot of partnerships and collaboration in order to achieve them. As I mentioned, Northglenn developed their energy action plan in 2019. This vision statement here, the Northglenn community will conserve its resources and promote sustainability through energy awareness, renewable sources, and collaboration to provide an exceptional quality of life and resilient future for residents and businesses. Really provided us kind of our starting point as we went into the electric vehicle planning. So knowing that you're not starting from scratch, and we've kind of got this vision to build on and remind us of that really kind of guiding light of exceptional quality and kind of resilient future. Through the electric vehicle action planning phase, we really aimed to develop an action plan that was very specific to Northglenn's vision and Northglenn's needs. We recognize that all communities are very different and really want to make sure that the planning phase and the strategies and goals identified are unique to your community. We also identify opportunities to support implementation through the Xcel Energy offerings as applicable. And then, as I mentioned, provide a platform for Xcel Energy to identify gaps and collaborate on future development. The planning process, as we mentioned, was led by Partners in Energy Facilitation Team in close collaboration with the city, including Becky and a variety of other stakeholders across city staff, and also community stakeholders. We had a couple of business representatives, the Sustainability Committee, Adams 12 School District was involved in the planning process. We held 3 workshops and then 3 topic-specific focus groups that we'll get into in a little bit that align with the chapters of the plan. We also included questions in the comp plan planning process related to transportation questions, and we're able to get a lot of really great feedback with over 200 or over 300 respondents to our questions related to transportation and electric vehicle needs. And so that was really used to help inform the strategies and what some of the outreach channels and activities will be as it relates to those strategies. Similar to the Energy Action Plan process, we developed an electric vehicle plan vision statement. So you see that on your screen there. Really leaning into the sustainability plan goals and targets as well to really align all of these activities that the city is doing. So the vision statement for the EV Action Plan is the Northglenn will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve air quality through electric vehicle adoption and infrastructure that is inclusive, sustainable, cost-effective, and innovative. The overarching plan goal is to increase environmental and economic sustainability for the community transitioning to an electric transportation future, reaching 4,200 electric vehicles by 2030. We realize this is a very aspirational goal, and a lot goes into what needs to happen, including supply chain that is really outside of the control of the city. However, this goal does align with the state of Colorado EV plan. That plan is to reach 940,000 electric vehicles on the road in the state by 2030. And so this is scaled specifically to Northglenn's population. So again, recognizing that it's aspirational, but also knowing how fast technology changes and wanting to lean into being a part of that state plan and broader EV future. As part of the EV planning process, we developed these 4 focus areas, which is how the plan is laid out into these different chapters. These were based off of the priorities that were identified with the stakeholder group. The focus areas include municipal fleet, public charging, public adoption, and policy. Underneath here, you'll see subtopics that related more specifically within each of those. So there's strategies and kind of action and data related to each of those subtopics. Starting with the municipal fleet. The target here really is to develop a target for a Go EV resolution based off the results of the Fleet Electrification Advisory Program that the city is participating in, that I believe you all are familiar with based on some previous council meetings with Rob Weber and Becky. The strategies we identified as part of this are to participate in that Xcel Energy Fleet Electrification Advisory Program, so already working on implementation of that strategy, which is exciting. Following that, that program and Partners in Energy will develop a charging infrastructure implementation plan to help figure out how to phase charging infrastructure and what those needs to look like. We'll also help support connecting you all to EV funding opportunities. So realizing that there's a lot of grants, there's a lot of money that's out there and is coming both at the state level, the federal level, to really support electrification of vehicles. And so through the Partners in Energy implementation support, we'll continue to provide those resources. Excuse me. The next focus area is public adoption. The target here is to increase the number of registered EVs in Northglenn, again, to that 4,200 by 2030 that aligns with the overarching plan goal. There is an intermediary goal to 2025 of 1,700, just to track how that is changing over time. In our baseline for the EV planning process was 2020, I believe, and Northglenn had 50 registered EVs at that time. I've not yet been able to get updated 2021 numbers, but based on how we've seen increases across other communities, do expect that to have gone up fairly significantly over the last year. The strategies to achieve these goals are to develop a volunteer task force to promote and support EV adoption. So the task force idea is really knowing that it takes a village to increase adoption. We know that a lot of ways it's going to take, both variety of staff resources, whether it's planning or communications or even public works being able to kind of promote their own experiences with fleets. Also looking at the sustainability committee to help increase adoption and just spread awareness of programs and opportunities and the benefits of EVs and kind of doing some of that myth busting related to electric vehicles. So the task force really is kind of a community of supporters of the EV action plan. Another strategy is to conduct a very targeted community education campaign. So this will be in close collaboration with the communications department to spread awareness of the EV action plan, of available resources, existing charging stations. Really, the idea is to educate consumers about the benefits, how it improves air quality, things like that, connections to Xcel Energy resources. We know that there's still a lot of misconceptions about electric vehicles, and so a lot of education and awareness is needed in order to promote that adoption. Another strategy is to support and promote community and regional ride and drive events. So this is in collaboration with dealerships and some other regional entities to really get people behind the wheel or feeling and touching an electric vehicle, again, to help support kind of that outreach and awareness component also. A lot of times, just going back to the misconceptions, once people have experience either being in an EV or seeing one or talking to someone that has an electric vehicle, their chances of purchasing one in the future go up pretty significantly. And then finally, collaboration, again, regionally to organize either the EV group buys with auto dealers. So recognizing that transportation is not done in a vacuum and is very much a regional effort, some of these strategies lean into that idea of collaboration across the region in order to promote. Group buys really look at providing opportunities for discounts if certain going in together with other cities or the county to provide some of those discounts if you can help promote that through the auto dealerships. Those don't require any financial commitment from the city. Get a lot of questions about that. The next focus area is public charging. The target here, there's two. The first is to install 100 public charging stations in Northglenn by 2030. This may seem like a lot. It is, again, related to the state goals and a state infrastructure analysis that was completed by the Colorado Energy Office in conjunction with some of their partners to identify how many charging stations were needed at different county levels and across the state. And so this is, again, scaled based on the number of vehicles. We do find that increasing public charging stations really helps promote that adoption because it reduces range anxiety. And kind of contributes to that behavior change. People are so used to seeing gas stations all of the time. Making that switch to electric vehicle charging stations to ensure that you're not running out of power really helps spur that adoption. The second target is to, again, build those regional partnerships to develop charging infrastructure across the region. Strategies related to these targets in this focus area are to conduct an EV charging siting study. So this really looks at mapping where existing stations are, where future growth may happen. We'll use factors such as dwell time, how long people are spending at certain locations to identify potential sites for those public charging stations. Another strategy is to conduct a business outreach campaign. So recognizing that these charging stations are obviously not all going to be hosted by the city, and you'll need some private partnerships in order to make those happen. And so doing outreach with Northglenn businesses in order to promote the benefits and opportunities that are available for those public charging stations. And then leaning again into the regional collaboration, developing resources to support regional charging and mobility hubs, and then promoting and evaluating innovative funding mechanisms for public charging. So again, helping the community be aware of what resources are available, both at the state and federal levels, and other grant opportunities related to electric vehicles. Within public charging, we did identify kind of a sub-focus area related to multifamily. So Northglenn has a pretty significant number of residents that live in multifamily housing, and it's very much an equity consideration when looking at electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations. There's also just, compared to installing them at general public sites and businesses, additional considerations for multifamily residents, how the charging, payment is structured, and also walkability is really important, because obviously if you're needing to charge your car overnight while you're a resident in a multifamily building, you need them close by. And so some of the strategies or the target related to this was to install at least one charging station within a quarter mile of each multifamily property. I believe there's about 20 multifamily properties in the city, so that will help contribute to the public charging station goal overall as well. And then the strategies are outreach to property owners to encourage them to install those by providing resources and building relationships. Again, conducting a public charging needs and siting assessment, and then looking at creative funding mechanisms for multifamily specific needs. The final focus area is policy. So this focuses on updating and adopting policy to increase infrastructure and consistent practices across Northglenn. So this, recognizing that there is not a lot of new development in Northglenn, there's some happening right now, and there's a building codes effort that I believe Becky's involved with to look at EV codes and in things like building codes. This focus area looks at different options beyond those building codes. So can you create a pricing policy, for example, at city-owned stations to encourage kind of consistency across those? Looks at kind of other standards related to equity or accessibility through some of those policy efforts. Through the building codes cohort, the multifamily targets that are being proposed are 5% EV installed, so that would be the charger is actually getting installed while the property is being built. 15% is EV ready, so that's essentially having all the cable and wiring installed so that you can install a charging station later. And then EV capable looks at just ensuring that the infrastructure is there for future upgrades. As I mentioned earlier, following this planning phase, Partners in Energy does support an 18-month implementation period with options for additional and more targeted support beyond that. We provide, through this implementation process, we provide project management to keep strategies moving. We'll help connect Northglenn to Xcel Energy resources, and again, those program managers to talk about specific opportunities. We're already seeing some of that in action. We've got a call with economic development tomorrow to talk about some EV charging opportunities. Provide industry updates, both at the state and federal level, and again, those grant opportunities. There's a lot of funding coming out, and so Partners in Energy provides that support and those channels in order to help navigate a lot of those funding streams, how to layer all of the funding streams together to really get good outcomes and reduce the cost burden to the city. We also track progress, so providing data updates and tracking metrics over time to ensure that the targets and goals outlined are being met. We provide communications and outreach support, so developing an outreach plan and how to leverage events and other communications channels to get information out. We also provide co-branded marketing collateral. So it's co-branded between the City of Northglenn and Xcel Energy to promote available opportunities or programs or just build, again, that education and awareness. We'll layer this with the Energy Action Plan implementation that is still ongoing, so it's not an additional burden on the team that's already participating with those efforts. It also provides a really good way to connect energy efficiency, renewable energy activities with electric vehicle options to really look at it as kind of a holistic energy offering. I've provided some support examples here. I know it's a lot of words on the slide, so I'll just touch on a few of these. We've talked about them throughout these different focus areas. We'll continue the coordination with the Xcel Energy electric vehicle infrastructure programs. We also do a lot of research and connect staff to those funding sources so that city staff isn't having to take that on their own on top of their other very busy jobs, recognizing that there's a lot of capacity constraints. So think of us kind of as an extension of support through those processes. I mentioned the outreach and communications plan previously and the outreach materials that can include, developing website content, social media. We can develop educational workshops and help deliver those. Training the task force we identified as in one of the public adoption strategy. So kind of a train the trainer model so that they're equipped to answer questions from residents and businesses in the future. We'll also help coordinate any regional activities with either other area cities, Adams County, other regional entities. There's also an organization called Drive Clean Colorado that we work pretty closely with that hosts a lot of outreach events and additional technical support. And leading those mapping efforts to identify public or potential charging locations. And providing best practice information about things like EV group buys, but also charging station pricing or operations or things like that. Did you want to go over this one? Sure. Okay.
So this slide just kind of outlines an estimated staffing and budget needs. This is a very ambitious plan as it's laid out, and so we wanted to be realistic about what we could actually take on versus what resources are put towards it. And so one of the things to keep in mind as we move through this process is that some of the items that are identified as strategies might not happen in the next 18 months if they don't have dedicated staffing or resources. We'll bring forward a budget proposal during the budget cycle that outlines some of these activities, and at that time you can decide if we want to pursue them or not. So this gives an estimate based on the different departments that participated in the planning process of how much additional time they would need to spend on this. Some of these items that are strategies in the plan can be absorbed in our day-to-day activities. So I'm not saying we can't do none of the plan will happen. Just some of the items that are strategies in the plan would require additional resources. Is there anything I missed with that?
All right, so next steps, we're here to talk about the Electric Vehicle Action Plan and answer any questions that you all have about the plan, the strategies, or the implementation MOU. That is the next step following council approval of the plan and the MOU is to get that signed, and then we will launch implementation in May. We've got an event to promote a lot of electric vehicle resources in collaboration with IECRM on April 29th. They were a key partner throughout our planning process, and they're hosting an event the same day. So wanted to coordinate and collaborate to both promote their event and kind of showcase what they're doing for the city of Northglenn, and then provide resources to residents at that event. And then in May, we'll launch implementation and get started on some of these activities, including beginning with a press release and a website launch with some content related to the EV action plan and available resources. And with that, we'll take questions.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. I have two questions. The first one is, in your presentation, you're talking about EV vehicles, but I don't hear anything about hybrids. How, is that's not part of the plan, and if so, why not?
We did not specifically include hybrids vehicles because they still run on gasoline and still a portion of gasoline and still contribute to some of those particulate matter and greenhouse gas emissions. Xcel Energy's goal and their electric vehicle programs are specifically related to fully electric vehicles. So these opportunities that are available through Xcel Energy would not be available to hybrid vehicles. Now, we recognize there are benefits to hybrid vehicles, and another option is plug-in hybrid vehicles. So it's not to say that we can't be promoting the benefits of those, but the strategies and the plan were specifically related to fully electric.
Well, I guess the reason I'm asking is that one of the drawbacks of a completely EV is that mileage, before it needs another charge. And so it seems the hybrids address that. So I'm just curious what you're going to tell people if they say, well, I want to drive to Wyoming, all the time, and so I need something that I
Sure.
can do that with.
The range on vehicles has increased pretty significantly. So part of it is an education component. The charging station network is also continuing to be built out. Most people are using electric vehicles kind of as daily commuters, for example. So while there are still challenges with some of those longer range options, there are, increased range availability and increased charging network. Part of the federal infrastructure bill that is coming out and all of the funding will be distributed to the states beginning in August is to help build out a lot of that fast charging network across those longer corridors to help support some of those longer travel times.
Okay, all right, well, that answers that question. Then my second one is, the city has a sustainability task force. So I know somewhere in there you were talking about a task force. Is that in addition to the sustainability task force?
Yes, the task force that we worked with on the EV action plan was city staff, Tri-County. There was some overlap, so we did invite the sustainability committee to participate, and any members that were interested did, which weren't actually very many, but I think it was just meeting conflicts and whatnot with their schedules. But there was a little overlap, but it was a different committee.
Councilmember Mullica?
Yeah, I had a quick question about the multifamily charging. Is there grants available for, apartment complexes to implement EV charging?
Yes, so there's grants through the Colorado Energy Office, Charge Ahead Colorado. The city's applied for a couple of those in the past, and that is open to private businesses and multifamily properties as well. In addition to that, Xcel Energy offers multifamily charging infrastructure programs to help offset the cost and get some of those charging stations installed at multifamily properties. There's also some additional availability of funding and more kind of cost offset in some areas of Northglenn that have been identified by Xcel Energy as being more heavily impacted by air quality. And so a lot of the multifamily properties, through our mapping exercises, we did identify would be eligible for all of those funding opportunities that then you can stack together to really help offset those costs.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Councilmember Brown?
Oh, I was just going to add to the conversation with multifamily is we were pretty specific about not saying we needed all of the infrastructure to be at multifamily residential because it's hard to connect with the owners in some cases. And so creating proximity possibly on city properties where it's walkable for multifamily also helps with that equity.
Okay, and then just to clarify, so all of the city sites, charging sites, are those free, or are they kind of like you swipe a card and then you pay? I don't know. I don't actually know how they work.
It's currently structured right now as free. I anticipate that in the future, the way we applied for the grant was it was going to be free for the first couple of years.
Okay.
I anticipate that we will implement a payment structure in the
Okay.
future. And that's part of the policy development that was identified
Okay,
in this planning process so that we can have consistency across the stations and recoup the maintenance and also electricity costs to the city.
Great, thank you.
Sorry about that. Councilmember Brown?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I found it really interesting. I think my question is more for Heather at this point. Heather, we're going to roll into the budget process. Can we try to break down the FTE count of what we need as to what we need in the next year, the following year, and the following year in order to get this moving? Or is this just straight up from the get-go that we're asking for 1 to 4 FTEs?
Yes, we can break down the ask based on that feedback.
Thank you very much. I think that'll help us when it comes to budgeting
Sure.
headcount. Thank you.
And I do want to clarify that the 1 to 4 FTEs does also include staff time that can absorb some of that. So I don't anticipate that we'll be asking for 4 FTEs to implement the energy
Right.
action plan. I think it might be one person that is also doing other aspects of sustainability, so.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, Becky, but I just wanted to clarify.
Yes.
If you said 4 people, I'd probably fall on the ground and die.
Yeah, we've talked about the possible addition and recommendation of 1 sustainability coordinator plus Becky's time. So yeah, we'll break it down in a manageable format so you see the connection between what's recommended in this plan and then all the other activities that are happening on the sustainability front.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. My question kind of ties right into the end of that. So in the end, we had the sustainability coordinator coming on, and we're also talking to adding another full-time employee up to.
No.
could it
Councilmember
be-
Walker, yeah, let me clarify. We've had discussions, no decisions made about the possibility of needing to add a full-time sustainability coordinator. You all will talk about that in the 2023 budget process. Yeah. So right now, our sustainability program is spearheaded by Becky, a certain percentage of her time, Brooke's time, other staff members throughout the city, which that'll remain to a degree, but we'll provide the justification for a full-time dedicated sustainability coordinator.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa?
Thank you, Mayor. I actually have a few quick questions. In terms of a charging station, so help me understand, I'm sorry, how many vehicles can you charge? Is it just one vehicle, or is it like multi, or is it just how many the infrastructure or you built out?
It's usually 2. Sometimes the very fast chargers can support more than that. The charging stations that you currently have installed, like at the maintenance and operations building and at the rec center, senior center, those can support 2 vehicles at a time. And there's different levels depending on how fast, and that the levels dictate how fast you can charge your vehicle. So there's a range there as well.
I was just curious, because I'm thinking, with these goals of having one within a quarter mile of multifamily, we can, those goals are obtained, is that going to be sufficient?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're in the data that we analyzed, looking at the state infrastructure report. It does assume, I believe, the number. So like 100 public charging stations, for example, would actually be like 200 plugs. So that further supports the kind of build out of all of those and the availability of those charging stations.
Great, thank you. And then I had another question. The goal is 4,200 in about 8 years, which is a really big number when we have at about 50 in 2020. And then 1,700, is that the check-in point, or are there plans to kind of check in sooner than 3 years from now to see how that needle is moving? I know a lot of that will depend on that regional collaboration too.
Absolutely. So we'll be checking and providing updates over the implementation period and as desired. That really we just get that data from the Adams County DMV. And so it's very easy to obtain and kind of be checking in on that over time. The adoption curve, obviously from 2025 to 2030 is more than double, right? So we kind of expect that more of that exponential growth over time as vehicle manufacturers start to come out with more, especially in the next couple of years. Supply chain issues get resolved, the charging network gets built out across the state. So that's kind of an add-on to your question, but yes, there are opportunities along the way to check in on that progress. I do have a request out to Adams County DMV to get an updated number. I just have not heard back yet.
I'll also add that the stakeholder group was kind of concerned about that number, which is why we were very intentional about saying aspires and keeping it consistent with the state goals versus coming up with our own, because we thought staying consistent with the state and what the state's trying to achieve has that synergy, but we also wanted to recognize that that's very ambitious and we can't control what kind of cars people buy. So.
Yeah, I mean, this is all wonderful. I'm really looking forward to it. I guess that regional part is what makes me a little nervous, just because we can have this goal. We need to make sure that we'll get complete. You called it range something. I don't remember what the term was.
Range anxiety.
Thank you so much.
So like when you're out low on a tank of gas and you start panicking, that's what range anxiety is.
Councilmember Brown?
Just one more question. And you may have said this and I may have missed it in all honesty, but is Excel offering any rebates, discounts to the new home complexes that we're building, like over at Carl's Farm and eventually over at the community center? That's not what we're calling that, but I have a headache. I'm sorry. Is Excel doing any kind of rebate for the builders to incentivize them to putting them in?
I might tap in Tammy Gunderzig, who's on Zoom as well with Xcel Energy. I know they would be eligible for some of the programs that are available, so the multifamily programs. I don't know if there's anything specific to like builders.
Thank you. There is not at this time a rebate specific to builders. The infrastructure cost for putting that in would be covered by one of our programs, though. I think depending on the location of the actual charger for the commercial or at a development level.
And I'm sure that we have an active campaign to get out to those builders and get them to jump on board.
There is significant outreach going on in education. There's a number of residential programs too, and just the push to build homes EV ready.
I have the same concern that that Shannon had, that the spacing, and if we have all these people getting it, and it's the way I understood your Shannon, everybody gets electrical parking places and there's one within a quarter mile of their house.
So,
to me, that's a concern.
One parking place?
One charging, which with
yes.
one of the things that has been identified, and Melody might be able to speak more to this, is that most people do charge at home at the end of the day versus using public charging out and about. The public charging does create a little bit of security in knowing that there's options if you do run out of electricity or battery power while you're out and about. But if you're using the cars around town or for around the area, generally charging at home at night is a good option for most people. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Okay.
Can I ask a silly question to that? If I were to charge at a public spot, am I paying? Whereas if I'm going to charge at home, I'm going to pay my electrical bill. So that's just all I'm asking is, if I'm at one of these public spots, am I paying to use the electricity like I do with my gas?
Typically, yes, but not always. It can depend. So for instance, the city of Northglenn owned charging stations now are free. So you would not be paying for that electricity. Other public charging stations owned by private businesses may charge a small fee. However, it's usually related to the rate that they're paying for electricity. So it's still relatively low. Xcel Energy is aiming for an equivalent of about $1 per gallon of gasoline for the electricity rates. Obviously, at home, incentivizing charging kind of overnight when electricity is cheaper really helps with that. But so does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions as well. Not that long ago, 2030 seemed really far away. And I did the math and I was like, oh no, it can take me
Like
longer.
92 months.
But that is not that long. So to go from 3 charging stations to 100 in just 8 years' time, that is really ambitious. It's exciting. But I just wanted to, I don't know, that was it. I was like, wow, 100 would be great. The range anxiety, so Councilmember Malika, recommended, which I agree. I would be happy as part of some sort of public campaign to share my own experience, because I have, like, everything that you're talking about and everything that Councilmember Brown is asking, I've experienced in the last 4 months. Range anxiety is terrible. And I did it to myself just the other day. Didn't plug in, left my house and realized I can't get through my day, the amount of stops I have to make with what I have. And it is not the same as just running to the gas station. It's just not. So, and I was just fortunate to be able to sit at a fasting one for about 30 minutes, but that made me 30 minutes late for work. It's not. So you have to change your thinking, and I know you know all of these pieces, but I think as we look into how are we doing the community education campaign, as much as I love it, I can't take a road trip efficiently. And I used to road trip all the time. So in my household, I think we're probably going to have one of each, just so that we can take a road trip. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of those pieces. I wondered about when we're adding those 100, or we're adding the 97, are any of them going to be faster charging? Because I love this one, but it takes 8 hours.
Yeah.
And so there's no reason for me to use it.
Yes, we did not specifically break those out at this level by the fast chargers versus the level 2 chargers. We do have that information, if it's helpful to include to kind of inform that. It as you start scaling some of those numbers down from the state and the county level, it gets a little trickier to kind of dictate that more specifically, and some of them might be workplace charging, and there's some data quality things that get in there with kind of setting specific targets on the type of chargers. But we do anticipate that some of those, or many of those, could be the DC fast or the level 3 charging stations to help with that, the speed of it, as you mentioned.
I think it's critical because 8 hours is a really long time. And so, and speaking, there's some at the mall, there's some at different locations, and from my experience, they don't always work, so that's frustrating. You don't always have the adapter you need to use it, or that charging doesn't work with the vehicle you purchased. And so you could get yourself stuck, and it's a network, it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
But I wanted to thank Excel. Thank you, Tammy, for being here. And kind of push for the educational piece. I'd like to see, I don't see it in the list specifically, talk to dealers. There are a lot of cars that are on the used car lot, and their salesmen don't know what they're doing, and they're like, here you go, have a fun car, you got this, right? But if Excel would partner with car dealers, I think
Yes.
that's a huge education campaign, because I went down a different road that was thousands more expensive, and then got the charger from Excel, seamless, rebate, affordable, amazing. But had someone not told me to call Excel, I wouldn't have known.
Yeah.
And the person who should have told me was the person who sold me the car.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So even if you just handed out a bunch of flyers and said,
Yeah.
give these to every new
Yeah.
EV owner.
They do have a growing dealership outreach team.
Okay.
It is a work in progress, but there are some very concerted activities around dealership outreach that are going on. There are certain dealerships throughout the metro area that are identified kind of as key partners. On the Xcel Energy website for EVs, you can locate where some of those are. But yes, that is an ongoing practice and activity, and certainly through things like group buys and things like that, just help those dealers become more aware of the demand also. So certainly we'll relay that information. Thank you.
Well, and especially because we have Northglenn dealers too.
Yeah.
And they're on our lots as well, which
Absolutely.
is exciting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's incredible. I think this presentation was very nice. I appreciate Councilmember Brown's suggestion because on the list of FTEs, any way to sort of, it's not the easiest way to look at that, I guess.
Sure. Yeah.
Because like 0.1 FTE, you know, as Becky mentioned, could be absorbed into someone. So if there was a way to kind of maybe develop a position based on these characteristics, and then the rollout of 23, 24, 25, like what, you know, what does that look like? I liked that suggestion, so thank you. All right, I don't see any more hands. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, next up, employee handbook revisions. Tamara Dixon, our Director of Human Resources, is here to present to council. Hi.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, council
evening.
members. I'm glad to be back. Let me get my presentation. Uh-oh. You're good. Thank you. I am here this evening to present to you suggested revisions to our employee handbook. It has been quite some time since we took a look, so there are several edits to present to you this evening. In your packets, sorry, I'm so short. In your packets is a matrix outlining the revisions, but I would really love to walk you through each of them as we are seeking your feedback. So I will start at the top. We scrubbed the entire handbook. We wanted to make sure there was inclusive language. There were also some titles that needed to be corrected and department names. We also corrected typos that we found that had not been looked at. Moving on to our introduction, we had to acknowledge the work of our cultural design team. So we added our new city values into the introduction. Our first policy, alcohol and other drugs, we noticed that other drugs were missing from that policy. So we inserted the phrase or other controlled substances to the restriction of use section. We also removed the provision to provide training because that is not something that we have been doing, nor are we required to do. Our computer use policy has a new name. It is now computer use, security, data disposal, and breach. And Bob added a very timely section on the use of mobile and portable devices to that policy. Emergency conditions, this is a good one to explain. As our policies currently sit, if the city manager were to close city facilities due to a weather event, essential personnel, police, public works employees, they would have to come to work. The rest of us stay home because the facilities are closed, and we would have to use our own general leave to account for that time. So we are suggesting an edit that when the city manager closes city facilities, we use administrative leave. And those essential personnel that have to brave the elements and come in, that we provide them with the requisite number of general leave hours to add to their bank because they had to come in for that closure.
And this is a practice that I've already put in place, and it's been done differently in the past under different city managers. And I can tell you from my 20-plus year in local government, there's no right way to do this. I've worked under city managers from everything of City Hall doesn't close to what we're doing today, and I think this is the right fit for our organization, given the number of employees that we have with families, small children, and so we really try to follow what Adams 12 is doing, but that doesn't mean every single time. There's multiple factors that play into it.
Thank you. Moving on to our first new policy suggestion. Volunteering is something I think that makes us feel good when we do for others. And so we're suggesting the addition of an employee volunteer time off program. This policy would allow up to 16 hours annually for us as employees to go volunteer. We could volunteer for a city event. We could volunteer at a school. We get several requests for those, or for our favorite 501c3 organization. But again, it's something that I think builds our esteem and helps us as individuals grow when we're doing for others.
Can I interrupt? Is that limited to like organizations within Northglenn, or does?
No, ma'am, it's not. It
All
is your favorite 501c3, and that could be the Red Cross, or it could be a school.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Our next edit was to employment of relatives, and we simply edited this policy to clarify the definition of relative. Flexible work arrangements. While I list this as a new policy, if you recall, I came before you last May to introduce our flexible work arrangements pilot program. We piloted from last June until December, and that was deemed a success, so we're adding it to our employee handbook as a formal policy. The next edit is to our guidelines for conduct, discipline, and appeal process. Currently, we allow employees after 2 years to come and request removal of discipline from their file. Not only is that an antiquated process and not a best practice, but in consultation with our city attorney, we've deemed that if we remove performance issues and those issues return, we have no record of them, so you'd essentially have to start over as a supervisor documenting the same performance issues that were already addressed 2 years prior. We're suggesting the addition of a holiday to our list of observed holidays. Last year around June, I would say, a Colorado Municipal League survey was floating around on my HR listserv. And by December, it noted that several Colorado municipalities are adding the federal holiday of Juneteenth to their list of observed holidays. We are suggesting and humbly asking that we do the same here in Northglenn.
Starting this year
Starting this
is the
year, yes.
recommendation. So what that would look like from a practical standpoint is the holiday is on June 19th, as Tamara noted. So we would observe as a city the holiday on June 20th.
Because June 19th falls on a weekend. Thank you. Thank you, Heather. The next policy we are suggesting revisions to is our hours of work, on-call and standby, and related provisions. We edited this policy to note that if you are an employee and you are on extended medical leave or extended general leave, you are not eligible to receive standby or on-call pay, and that is because you're not working. So we had to edit that policy. Another new policy we are asking to add is our inclusion code of conduct. So we added the new value of inclusivity. We wanted to put an inclusion code of conduct in our handbook to explain what that behavior looks like and what it doesn't look like. Jury duty is the next policy we edited, and we simply edited this policy to align with our flexible work arrangements policy. Some employees work 8-hour days, some 9, some 10. Leave information, this policy had the most edits, as you can see. So quickly to go over these, we edited to clarify employees cannot work while they are on approved family medical leave. This presents a liability to our organization if we allow employees to work and they have not been released by their physician. We also clarified that if spouses work for the city and a new baby or they adopt a child, that both spouses, are entitled to 12 weeks of family medical leave. In some organizations, they actually have to split that leave, and that's a penalty to one of the parents. We added an accrual table so that our full-time and rotating shift employees could actually see what their maximums are.
Tamara, go ahead and advance your slide one.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you. My apologies. We adjusted the ability to convert 80 hours of general leave to 50% cash once per year, and that's from the current twice per year. The reason we did that is because of the next bullet. We noted that the conversion rate may exceed 50% in any budget year, and that would be based on the recommendation of the city manager and our finance director.
And if I can add on this specifically, I've had, I'd say, quite a bit of interest from employees to have a 100% buyback program. That costs money. And so we're looking at that, and again, where we landed was if we're in a financial position to do that, that's something I can bring forward to council, either through the budget process on an annual basis or mid-year to council. We have to balance that, though, with not creating an expectation that that's the program that's going to be offered every year. So currently, we offer the 50% buyback up to 80 hours max. So my focus, along with directors this past several months, has been getting employees to use their general leave time. That's been the focus. But I do have some employees who, by the time we get to the end of the year, will lose time. So certainly the buyback program today is the 50% up to 80 hours. But if we're in a position to do more, that's something I would bring forward. And there's no real good universal best practice out there amongst municipalities. It's kind of what each municipality does. Typically, municipalities say that there's financial constraints not to do the 100%. So we're trying to balance both the commitment and dedication we've seen from employees to where they've, accrued that time, and then also what we can do financially that's responsible.
Sure. Councilmember Goff?
I just have a quick question. I just want to clarify for myself and anybody who's listening to this. So when you're saying it's a buyback program, you mean if someone doesn't take the leave that they have accrued and earned, they can get like paid 50% back for those days they didn't get? That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah. And we have maximum accrual amounts that employees, where they start losing the time. They no longer accrue the time. But yeah, that's the program we have in place. So I can redeem 80 hours and get compensated for 50%.
I know, I mean, I just want to say to, all of our employees that we so appreciate, extra time and their dedication, but we also want to have that, home work balance. So I really would almost rather see people just, work their hours and go home and be with their families.
And that's because our COVID-19 response really magnified because we were so stretched thin in terms of employees working and keeping things afloat, that as we move through the next several months into 2023, I think we'll get to a better space where I'll really be able to gauge whether or not we need a 100% buyback program to help draw down or by mid-year. But, if I were to come to you and say 100%, then that would be the expectation. So I agree with you. I want to be able to have our employees take time off and have that work-life balance.
Thank you. And lastly, for leave information, we clarified the reporting requirements for use of military leave for our employees who serve our country and how their salary is paid while they are away. We're almost there. On our last page of the matrix, we edited maintenance of employee personnel files and disclosure of personnel information. Here we aligned this policy with the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. We are no longer able to release any compensation information for employees, so we struck that from the policy. We also edited outside employment and business activities. Here we simply remove the requirement that HR approve and sign off on those requests because the department director has already done that for their department. Paid family and caregiver leave, we have not changed the policy. It is working very well. We inadvertently left off domestic violence, stalking, and abuse victim as a reason for taking that leave. So we simply added that to the policy. Respecting the rights of coworkers was edited. We expanded the terms of protected classes simply to align with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission's terms and how they define those classes. Smoking regulations, a simple edit here. We have a new rec center, so we edited the designated area for smoking there. And lastly, our workplace violence and individuals of concern policy has a new title. And this policy was edited for language and an updated process and reporting methods. One other thing to note, the table of contents, as you may have noticed, is not updated. We wanted to see what would happen with these revisions before we added new page numbers. So those are our suggested revisions. I'm happy to take comments and questions.
Councilmember Brown?
As most people on council know, I'm the money person, self-appointed. if we add, the additional holiday for Juneteenth and we add 2 days or 16 hours to volunteer time, what's the cost to the city, Heather?
I would have to develop that number and get back to you.
Can you?
Yeah, I mean, I can email council, or if you want to direct me, otherwise I can provide the figure for having Juneteenth added as a holiday. In terms of the volunteer time, that's going to be based on usage, so we'll have to ballpark what we think engagement in that benefit would be.
And the reason I asked, just so that nobody is offended or thinking I'm just talking about Juneteenth, is that's a lot of days to add at one budget period for all of our employees. So that's where my concern comes, is that the total could be as much as 3 days per employee. So I would like to know the cost. And you can email it. I'm fine with that.
Is that something that council is comfortable if I just email that information out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilmember Duran Malika? Oh,
That was my question.
that was your question too. All right. Councilmember Goff?
So my question is, this Juneteenth, if we make a holiday for the city, does that mean we do not meet as a city council that day?
Correct.
And if I remember right, I think somebody had asked about looking at the days that we don't have, that city council doesn't meet. Is that coming up as a item at some point? I thought there was a question about that with, I think Councilmember Brown had brought that up because we seem to have missed a lot of them this year with the
Thought we
5
already-
Mondays.
we
and the
already
holidays.
talked about
We did
that.
talk
Did
about
have that
Yeah,
conversation.
did,
We already had that
I'm sorry.
We can re-email out this calendar that Joanna puts together for council that identifies the dates where we don't have meetings.
So Juneteenth, it probably won't be on that.
It won't
It
be,
is.
so we would, no, it is not. We
Yeah.
would add it if council approves the recommendations next Monday.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for Tamara?
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, our final item, regional MOU regarding homelessness services. Rupa Venkatesh, our assistant to the city manager, is here to present. Hello.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Tonight, I am here to share information in regards to an MOU to address homelessness as a region, and this MOU is going to be led by Adams County. So currently, we do not strategically address homelessness on a regional level, but rather in our own silos. And in August of 2021, leadership and staff from Adams County, its municipalities, and the City and County of Broomfield started meeting monthly. Our city manager, Heather Geyer, was the one that suggested and really strongly advocated and pushed for the MOU that is in your packet as attachment 2. So we, meaning staff from across the region, could have kept having these monthly meetings where we agree something needs to get done. But this MOU really formalizes this commitment and also gets the important buy-in from elected officials. There are several key components to this MOU. It's a 3-year term that can renew for up to 3 consecutive 1-year terms. Any party has the right to terminate, and there is no financial commitment in this MOU. It's an MOU between Adams County, all its municipalities, and the City and County of Broomfield. Adams County is going to be taking the lead on coordinating meetings and reporting on outcomes and outputs. A central hub would be created so data can be shared regionally and the root causes of homelessness can be analyzed. Currently, the data that we have as a county is from the point in time count, which does not accurately depict the true numbers. Each municipality and county would assign a staff member to participate on a core team which would be established to deliver on outputs and outcomes. Outputs include an objective, evidence-based report that outlines the need for day shelters, short and long-term housing, and other shelters, and potential locations and properties that would be most suitable. The Central Data Hub is another output that's previously been mentioned. And what we're hoping to accomplish from these outputs is more collaboration regionally and improved service provision and infrastructure so that homelessness is a rare, brief, and one-time experience. All the municipalities have expressed some level of interest in signing on to this MOU. Bennett, Federal Heights, and Broomfield have already signed on. Thornton's council is considering it later this month. Adams County is presenting to the Brighton City Council on May 10th. Commerce City, Aurora, and Westminster currently do not have an exact date for their council's consideration. Depending on council feedback tonight, we'll be bringing this back as a resolution for consideration on May 9th. With that, I will turn it back over to the mayor for any questions. Any questions from council? Councilmember Duran Malika?
Not a question, but a comment. This has been a very long time coming. I'd like to thank Northglenn staff for everything that they've done to participate in meetings. I remember years ago, we had a conversation of like, hey, somebody should do something about this, we should organize. And it's just been, it's kind of nice to see that we've gotten to a point like this, and that I'm hoping that all the other municipalities jump on. And that we could actually see some real change in our region, because I think that that's what everyone's trying to aim for. So thank you.
You're Councilmember Goff?
Yeah, I would echo everything that Councilmember Duran Malika said. But the question I have was, if I'm understanding when I go through this, it looks like it's all about sharing information. So what I was wondering is how we had our housing program here in Northglenn I'm just trying to picture how that would fit into something like this. Is this something where if we would have to open it up to everybody that's in this MOU? Is it something we'd have to discuss with them first if we were to do something like this? I'm just curious about like actually taking action rather than just sharing information.
Yeah, so the main way is through the HMIS system, which is the Homelessness Management Information System. So each of the street outreachers, they should have access to it, and it's run by MDHI. So we all signed an agreement with MDHI, each of the street outreach workers, to start sharing that data. But outside of the HMIS system, so for example, Jessica Holtz, our crisis response program manager, she reports on calls for service that our police department gets. So that's something that we could choose to share. Just the interactions that we have that don't necessarily get counted in the point in time count. So those type of things that we would want to share,
Right.
so that we have a true understanding of.
But it doesn't, it wouldn't have affected like our winter housing program. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, that
Well,
that
No.
falls outside of this MOU.
Yeah.
Well, so it would, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if anything, hopefully it creates greater collaboration. So one of the things we've talked about, and so the overnight stay program is one example where we've been far out ahead of several municipalities, and they're talking to Rupa and Jessica and learning about what our experience has been and what our successes have been on that particular program. So if they want to adopt that program in their own communities, they can. The piece, though, on a longer term, big picture perspective that we hope that comes about from this MOU is the sharing of the data to really build the case of what we need, where we need it, and why we need it in terms of types of facilities. So we know we have that continuum of individuals experiencing homelessness. So there's not one facility out there that can do that. Now, the MOU is just the beginning of the conversation and getting the stakeholders to the table. So then what we'll need to do is when we can identify we have this property or we have this opportunity or there's a property in another community, we all come together and figure out how can we leverage funding either through the state or the federal government and locally. So we always fall back on the Ralston House model, right? We all came together to make that facility happen. So we're really modeling it after that approach and hoping that we can get to the longer term, the major capital construction of facilities that we need to get to. Those will come, there'll be multiple conversations. Those will come back to council in the form of an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement.
So this is the first step.
And to add on to that too, we would want to include data from our winter housing program participants, because one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this MOU and with meeting as a core team and analyzing the data is really understanding what the root causes of homelessness are. So with our case management, we're able to really dive deep into why these participants were homeless or are homeless. So that's something that we haven't done in the past and something that we think we really need, so that once we start understanding what the needs are and why, then we can start addressing, like Heather mentioned, what the possible solutions are.
Well, sounds like a great idea, but
Councilmember Lukman-Hiramaki.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo what Member Mullica said. This is definitely something that we have needed. I'm so excited for this. There's just no way to move forward in addressing homelessness without that regional collaboration. And one of the things I'm excited about are some of the programs that we've talked about before, like day camps, having a navigation center, stuff that we know is quite difficult for us to do alone as a city without having that regional buy-in. And really just makes me look forward to the next steps after the winter/summer housing program. You know, what is that going to look like? Because we've all talked about it. We know that something else has happened. But again, it's difficult to do that alone. So that extension of the overnight stay program, and I know it's just the beginning of a conversation, but it still makes me very excited for the future and to hear that so many cities are wanting to buy in, because I think we're all realizing that us alone and each little city here and there, we can't do it without that collaboration. So that.
Yep, sounds good.
Great, thank you.
Okay, are there any other items for council?
Mayor,
Yeah.
Brooke did ask me to make a plug, architecture camp tomorrow, 9 to 5, here in the council chambers. So please feel free to engage if you have the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I went by there on the way here. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, well, thank you very much. Hearing none, I'm going to adjourn the I'm going to adjourn the study session and proceed to the special city council meeting. I will now call to order the special city council meeting of April 18th, 2022. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wolford, Councilmember Whitkovich,
Here.
Councilmember Hadamio,
Here.
Councilmember Duran Mullica,
Here.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa, here. Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
So I know Mayor Pro Tem wanted to join us for this. Should we have her in this before we adjourn to
We
executive
should,
session?
and he needs to break down for exec session, so we can take a few minutes if you want to take a break.
Well, but I haven't adjourned to
Oh,
executive.
yes.
We haven't
Once
voted.
you do
We haven't done any of those things yet, so I'm
Sorry.
like, what I'm trying to ask is, would you like Mayor Pro Tem on the roll call for this meeting before we adjourn to executive session?
It's not necessary. She
It's-
can join after
Okay, that's
We make
all,
the motion.
that's all I was
after the
asking.
vote. Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session pursuant to Section 4.5A of the City of Northglenn Home Rule Charter for personnel matters regarding a city manager performance check-in.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Joanna, open the vote, please.
The vote is open.
Please vote.
Councilmember Brown, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hold on. Happened to me last time.
Okay, I will close that vote, and the motion to adjourn to executive session passes unanimously.
We will adjourn to executive session. Definitely take a break while everyone shuts down.
Hey, Heather, can I ask a question?
Yeah.